The Harlem Renaissance, also known as the New Negro Movement, was a movement that created a new black cultural identity. It took place in Harlem after World War I from the 1920s to the mid-1930s. This movement included many literary and artistic works, musicians, photographers, poets, and scholars that were produced by African Americans. Many African Americans came from the South fleeing because they couldn't express their talents in the caste system. This is also known as the Great Migration. W.E.B. Du Bois encouraged talented artists to leave the South.
Webb Du Bois became the first African American to earn a doctorate from Harvard. He fought for African American rights and co-founded the National Association for Advancement of Colored People. He launched a historical magazine called The Crisis and published the best literary pieces from African Americans during the Harlem Renaissance, including some of Langston Hughes, who dedicated The Negro Speaks Rivers to Du Bois.
Allen Leroy Locke was a philosopher best known for his writing on the support of the Harlem Renaissance. Locke promoted African American artists and writers, encouraging them to look to Africa for artistic inspiration. Much of Locke's writing focused on Africa and African American identity. He published pieces on the Harlem Renaissance, communicating the energy and potential of Harlem culture to a widespread audience of both black and white readers, but became famous when he published The New Negro, which became a classic.
The literary focus of the Harlem Renaissance centered around the Negro and who he was as a person. Langston Hughes wrote novels, poems, and plays along with children's books. He is most famous for his poems. His writing reflected the idea that black culture should be celebrated because it's just as important as a white culture. Zora Neale Hurston, a novelist, anthropologist, and folklorist. Hurston was recognized for a distinctive way of relying on her feelings and ideas about racial division, and for her efforts to connect the both artistic world and the African American population. Hurston helped develop a common identity for her people during the influential time in history through their creative and meaningful ornate words. She was most known for producing the magazine Fire, which featured and showcased numerous writers in the Harlem Renaissance.
Artists of the time were primarily focused on portraying the Negro and who he was, much like the literature of the time. Aaron Douglas painted murals for public buildings and created illustrations and cover designs for many black publications, including Webb Du Bois, The Crisis, and The Opportunity. Lois Malloy Jones attended the School of Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. She entered artwork into exhibitions that did not recognize African Americans as artists. Prizes were awarded to her and taken away and given to her white competitors. Despite all of that, she prevailed as an artist.
The Harlem Renaissance brought along racial pride for blacks. The influence of the black art and music of the movement gave blacks a sense of uniqueness and individuality. For once, being black was beautiful, and they continued to say that they were possibly even better than whites. Langston Hughes quoted, "Why should I want to be white? I'm Negro and beautiful." No longer did blacks have a somber attitude that was expressed by many of the blacks that suffered from the racial discrimination.
Mass media allowed information to be transported much faster than ever before. The culture eventually reached to whites, and that is when the culture started to mix. Whites began showing up at nightclubs where black musicians performed jazz music. Whites adapted jazz style with open arms, including the swing dance and other dances. For the first time in American history, it seemed that blacks and whites were getting along with no conflict.
The Renaissance was more than a literary movement. It involved racial pride, fueled in the part of militants in the new Negro, demanding civil and political rights. It incorporated jazz and blues, which attracted whites to Harlem clubs, but the Renaissance had little impact on breaking down the barriers of the Jim Crow laws.